Hi. Oh, this is lovely.
Well, this is exciting, isn't it?
Very.
So, as we are approaching Father's Day soon, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity as father and daughter to talk about our working and maybe a little bit of personal relationship together, and to discuss the last 42 years of you being in business, of which I've been working with you for 20 years. So I think I'd like to kick off, and I'd love for you to share the story of how HOB, or back in the day, Hair on Broadway, was born. And did you always want to open your own salon, or was it just something that happened, you know, as time went on and you were kind of working your way up?
Very good question. So, I started hairdressing when I was 15 years old. I trained in a company called, at the time, Robert Fielding, which is now known as L&D. I always had the appetite for wanting to progress and to eventually have my own salon. What that looked like back then, I really didn't know. But, you know, when I met your mum, you know, I always sort of said to her that I would love to have my own situation, my own business, because, you know, I want to have my own family, and wanted to make sure that she was looked after as the best she could possibly be. Anyway, fast forward. So I was at the time about 18 and a half, 19. Paul, my partner in crime, not in the bedroom, I might add. It's very important I get that one in. I always say that when I introduce him. We were working together in a salon in Stanmore, and, you know, I think that 4.5 years together, we sort of one day spoke to each other about possibly opening our own salon. Both our parents, funny enough, met on honeymoon. So there's a lot of history there.
I love that.
And yeah, I mean, you know, we're like brothers, literally. And always remember going out with him and his, back then, first wife, Mandy, and myself and Gina. And I think we were engaged at the time. And we said that it'd be great to open our own salon together. And we were talking about where it should be, and we came up with Mill Hill, Broadway, because there was only, I think, at the time, one salon in the street. And I always remember your mum, razor sharp as she is, saying, well, look, you know, if you're opening the Broadway in Mill Hill, you've got to call it Hair on Broadway. And we said, wow, yes, what a great idea. In 1982, we got married. And a year later, we opened Hair on Broadway. That was 1983. And I was 23 years young when we opened. I mean, wow.
You're a baby.
Literally, how young was I to be opening, you know, our first salon? 2 years later, 1985, you
Hello.
were born. I was aged 25, and in fairness, I did not have a clue what I was doing with this little bundle. I always remember the first 6 months was difficult. You, unfortunately, didn't sleep through the night. There were lots and lots of sleepless nights. And of course, at the time, we didn't realise that you were allergic to milk. I'm not going to lie, at the time when you were born, I wanted to push you back up because I thought, oh my God, what is this? You know, it was difficult times. But yeah, I used to talk to your mum's stomach while you're in there, and I used to say, literally, you know, you're going to be one day in working with me, and here's what you need to know. So you were trained about Hair on Broadway back then while you're in your mummy's tummy. So you've had it running through your veins all your life. That's why you know it inside out and back to front. And it's great that you've been able to kind of fill my shoes. Now, our CEO. I'm not going to say it was easy back then. I was working 7 days a week, building the business, building the brand. Do I regret that now? Yes. I didn't see you or your sister growing up because all I knew was to work. And if I had my time again, I would not work as hard as I did back then. And I would have certainly wanted to devote more time to being at home. But the truth is, I used to say that my weekend started Monday morning, funny enough, because I did find it difficult, I'm not going to lie. I think it's because I was so young. And there wasn't the help like you've got today, where you've got social media, where you can go on and sort of look to see where there's help and advice with, you know, being a parent. So I've kind of learned as I've gone on, A, about being a parent, and B, about running a business. Like all of us, made loads of mistakes along the way. But the truth is, you don't learn unless you do make mistakes. But the key is not to make the same mistakes twice. My dream was to open 10 salons back in the day, which we did. And we found that having introduced a third partner in Akin Kanizi, who's 4 times British Hairdresser of the Year, he came along, I want to say, about maybe 3-4 years after we opened our first salon in Mill Hill.
How did you hear about Akin?
Well, that's a very funny story, actually. We had this girl that was working with us. I'll never forget. Her name was Terry, little blonde thing. And I always remember, I think she was the first girl's hairdresser that walked in for her interview, and she had tattoos and piercings like I'd never seen. It was like she was like this sort of classy punk rocker. And I thought, wow, is she going to go down well here in Mill Hill, Broadway, you know, Northwest London? She just literally come out of working in Covent Garden in a salon called Ocean Boulevard. And I always remember her saying that I used to work with this guy called Akin. I said, who? She said, Akin. I said, Akin. I said, what sort of a name is that? She said, well, forget about his name, she said, but what a talent. And she told me that he was thinking about giving up hairdressing to become a greengrocer. I said, a greengrocer? She said, yeah. I said, look, I'll tell you what. I said, give me his number and let me give him a call. Anyway, lo and behold, me being me, of course, I didn't waste any time. I got him straight on the phone and I said, hi, is that Akin? And he said, yeah, who's this? I said, this is Clive. I said, from here on Broadway. I said, you won't know who I am. I said, but I've got Terry here that you used to work with at Ocean Boulevard in Covent Garden. And she said to me that you're the most amazing hairdresser. He said, right. And she also told me that you're thinking about giving up the industry. I said, and by the sounds of it, that would be a real waste of a talent. I said, so before you make that decision, come and see me and let's see what we can sort out for you. He said, okay, that sounds great. He said, whereabouts is your salon? I said, you probably wouldn't have heard of it. I said, but it's in Mill Hill, Broadway. He said, Mill Hill, Broadway. He goes, where's that? I thought, oh my God, here we go. Obviously a real townie, this fella. I said, what, you've never heard of Mill Hill, Broadway? He said, no. I said, well, do you know Brent Cross? He said, yes. I said, well, it's nowhere near there. I said, well, funny enough, I said, we're about 10 minutes from Brent Cross. He said, okay. He said, give me the address. He said, I'm sure I'll find it. Anyway, that afternoon, we arranged to meet at about, just after lunch, I want to say about 2 o'clock. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. I'm looking out for this Akin. And I remember him driving down the Broadway in his convertible, wait for it, gold, yes, gold, Peugeot convertible. I thought, blimey, look at that cool dude. And in the passenger seat, he had his cousin Gwyn next to him, Not that I knew it was his cousin. And this geezer, Gwyn, had hair down to his backside. He looked like Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. Literally. Seriously, suntanned. And as I say, this mad hair. I thought it was like Tarzan and Jane driving down the Broadway in Mill Hill. Anyway, he parks up, he gets out of his car, and the two of them are walking down Millway, which is opposite the salon. And I thought, blimey, if I get this geezer on board, I need to give myself a pat on the back. Because here he was, this trendy, he had this quiff that was about 6 foot high on the top of his head. True story.
I've seen pictures of it.
I remember him wearing these high-waisted trousers, literally up to his I mean, you've never seen anything quite like it in your life. Great big muscles, great big biceps. And there was little me, little blonde me, right, with my George Michael hairstyle back then. Anyway, he's walked in, he's looked round, and I'm thinking, how am I going to convince this guy to come on board and work here in northwest London in Mill Hill Broadway, having worked in Covent Garden at Ocean Boulevard with Billy Shears. Literally, that was his name, Billy Shears. Anyway, it took a lot of persuading and a lot of convincing, but Akin came on board. And I kid you not, this guy had clients queuing round the door of Mill Hill Broadway. From trendies to 70, 80-year-old women that absolutely loved him.
What do you think it was that made people literally queue round the block for him?
Well, first of all, Paul and I were like the sort of wham boys of hairdressing back then. We were known as George and Andrew. I had my George Michael hairstyle, you know, my long blonde hair, luscious blonde, highlights, and of course Akin came along and he was like this trendy sort of Turkish, Greek, Cypriot Adonis that the Northwest London ladies just loved. I mean, they would sit there and they'd look in the mirror and of course, looking at me, looking at Paul, looking at Akin, you know, we were known as the triangle of the industry. And the thing was for us was that, and what convinced Akin at the time was, I said to him that we want to bring the West End to Northwest London, and he loved that. And that was our sort of, if you like, claim to fame, where we wanted the service element, the hairdressing element, and of course the, how can I put it, the schmooze element of giving those clients the service that they deserved. You know, because my background, along with Paul and Akin, was West End. I mean, we were West End trained. I trained in Knightsbridge, opposite Harrods, if you don't mind. And Akin was trained in Covent Garden, and his background was Al International as well. Knightsbridge they were as well. And of course, Paul, I got him a job at Robert Fielding training in Regent Street. So we had this West End running through our veins. So we knew how to give the best possible service and skill set to our clients, which is why it works so well.
What I love about the three of you, and again, this is something that still runs through the vein of the company 42 years later, is that triangle that you talk about is the creativity, consistency and service.
Yeah.
And the creativity is what Akin brings to the table as the creative director of the company.
Yeah.
The consistency is Paul.
Yeah.
And the service is you.
Yeah.
And I used to watch you from a young age when I came into the salon about how you were with not just your own clients, but with all of the clients. You'd be always working at that front section by the window in Bushy.
And in Mill Hill.
And in Mill Hill.
Yeah.
But when I was older and I've got memories of you working in that salon, you'd always be by the desk, opening the front door, greeting the clients. How are you? How was your holiday? You had this incredible ability to remember everything, even when you refer back to the name of Ocean Boulevard. Like, it's incredible that you remember the likes of Terry and that your memory goes that far back. But the creativity, consistency and service formula is what I believe has stood you in such great stead for your careers, because it's that dynamic trio that you have got together that has enabled you to build your business. And I don't believe that you'd be where you are today if you only had one or two of those things. I think if you just had consistency in service and not the creativity, we wouldn't be where we are. And if we just had the creativity and service and not the consistency, we wouldn't be where we are. And when I think about taking HOB forward into a new era, there will be so many things that the three of you have built that I intend on making sure are absolutely taken forward. And I think that leads me on to the next question of, we have been in business for 42 years, which is a celebration in itself. There's been lots of highs and lows of having a business for that time, and there's just highs and lows of running a business in general. But what would you say have been the highs and lows of running your business over the last 42 years? And how do you feel that HOB has evolved in order to try and survive, you know, recessions, Brexits, COVID? Because there's no doubt that all of these challenges that we've been faced with has not just affected us, it's affected our industry and it's affected the world. And the world is a very different place, I'm sure, to when you first opened your salon back in 1983.
Yeah, so look, let me just give a little bit of background before I go on to that about you, Tash, because I think it's a very important part of this story of father and daughter, especially, you know, being Father's Day. But one of my main, if you like, teachings for both you and your sister was to always have a good, strong work ethic. And, you know that when I got my first ever job, funny enough, when I was 13 and a half years old, working in the markets, which I absolutely loved. It gave me, you know, great grounding, and it taught me to be streetwise. But I had you and your sister working in those salons as soon as you were able to make a cup of tea, okay? Because I looked at it that if you could make a cup of tea, I could show you how to sweep the floor. Because one of my claims to fame is that I love the broom. I really do. You'll always see me sweeping up in the salons if I see hair on the floor. And, you know, my big thing was, as I say, to have you and your sister working in those salons to earn your keep. Because I always felt that it was important that you had a sense of value for money. So I always remember you coming into work with me in the Bushy salon, and yeah, I mean, I just loved having my own flesh and blood, my daughter being in the business, and it was always my dream to have you train as a hairdresser and, you know, to go on to being a great hairdresser, great stylist, because as we know, it's a great, you know, industry to be able to work in and to, you know, have a family, and you can sort of work anywhere in the world once you've got that qualification under your belt. But I'll never forget that when you started full time with us, and I believe it was in Northwood.
It was.
At the time. And I remember that time when you said that you sat me down, you and your mum, and saying that we need to talk to you. And I'm sitting in the kitchen that time, and you telling me that you felt that hairdressing wasn't for you. And I could see it coming, but I didn't ever envisaged that it would be the case that you wanted to leave and go and work somewhere else in doing something different. And I remember my world literally caving in, thinking, oh my God, you know, what is it I've done wrong for my daughter to wanting to do something else? And I always remember, I said, look, that's fine, Tash, but what's plan B? And of course, I got that response straight away. And
No, I remember saying, well, I want to go travelling. And you went, you want to go travelling? With what money?
I remember that. I mean, she wanted to go travelling. I think she was 16 or even 17 at the time. No, 17. And she said she wanted to go travelling. I thought, are you having a bubble bath?
Yeah, but you said to me, if you're doing that, you better go and find another job because I'm not paying for it.
That's absolutely right. Yes, I remember that distinctly. And she said, oh, Dad, I knew you'd say that. Don't worry, because I've got another job lined up.
Well, I hadn't yet. And I remember every morning I used to get on my door, used to go, are you up? Where are you going today? What interviews have you got lined up?
Yes.
Every single morning without fail.
Yes, and we agreed that she would continue working in the salon until she got a plan B in place. So I'd allow her to go on interviews, but lo and behold, within about a bloody week, this little devil got herself another job, believe it or not, and she got onto one of these management program schemes at the Gap in Watford. And I thought, you know what, fair play. She's got herself another job lined up. It's a management training program scheme. And I thought, well, you know what, let her do it. And maybe one day she'll come back to HOB, here on Broadway, as a potential future manager.
Well, that then took us to, I'll never forget it, March 2005. In fact, it was February, and you said to me, listen, I had a lot of managers leave where I was working, which in the end was in the Gap, in the flagship store in Bond Street, which unfortunately is no longer there. And I also used to go to town every week from Stanmore Station and basically spend all my money on travel. And I think you could tell that I wasn't happy, and there was an opportunity for me to be the front of house in Hatch End. So March 2005, I came back as front of house. I just remember it so vividly, and I was so pleased to be back. It almost felt like coming home. And I was there for around 6 or 7 months, and then you were recruiting for someone in the head office. And I remember thinking, do you know what, I'd been a junior, I've done front of house, but I really would love to understand what goes on into running the company behind the scenes from the head office. And I said to you, would I be able to go for that position in the office as the admin person? Why? What's wrong with the salon? And I said to you, I really want to learn what goes on behind the scenes, which you quite like the sound of. And I went into the office, and I was there for a good few years, decided to go back to studying in the evenings to do a bookkeeping and accounting course, because although I absolutely hated school, I wasn't the most academic, but I was quite naturally good at maths, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed numbers, I enjoyed making money. I was the kid that, you know, used to go round and clean the cars for the neighbours and sweep the leaves in the garden and make the fairy cakes and pretend they were for charity, but really they were for me. Went into the office, and that was so eye-opening for me, because it really did teach me about the day-to-day runnings of what you need to run a business. And then, I'll never forget it, 2007, probably one of the biggest points in your business, you opened Camden Salon and Academy, and you, Akin and Paul said, we're going to need to spend our time there every day building that place up, and we're going to need an area manager to go round into those salons to support the managers. And I was about 3.5 years in. I was 20 at the time, nearly 21. And I said, I think I'm ready to go and do that job. I know the front end, I know the back end. Let me go and be an area manager. And I remember you saying to me, I think you're capable, but you're very young, and you're going to be working with managers that are double your age. You're my daughter, and just be prepared that your life will not necessarily be made easy for you. Because I think people used to look at me and think, well, you know, she's the boss's daughter, she's got it really easy. And what they didn't realise is that I probably had it 10 times harder than everyone else. Because you always used to say to me, whatever I expect from her, I expect 3 times more from you. And you're going to always have to work harder than everyone else in the room to make sure you earn your stripes and you get the respect from everyone else?
Right. My biggest fear at that time was that you were going to be given a hard time and end up leaving, and I didn't want that to happen for you. So I made sure that I really prepped you for potentially what was going to be coming. And to your credit, you know, you stuck in there. You know, I remember you coming back in tears some evenings, and I'd had to talk you through what to say, what to do to make sure that that didn't happen again. And yeah, to your credit, I have to say, you certainly did earn your stripes through determination, hard work, giving out respect, receiving respect, and it took you quite a few years to get that in place.
I feel, and I've discussed this with Chelsea, my sister, I've got 2 kids myself, and I think before you become a parent, you've got this whole idea of how your parents are and what they do, and you were out working for a lot of my life in the early days, and we always used to say, you prefer the staff to your own family. I remember us saying to you all the time, all you ever do is work, 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 but it was your drive and your determination that I think you passed down to me and Chell. And actually, the resilience that I've got, the strength, the determination, has come from seeing what you have dedicated to your business and to your life for, well, my last 40 years. And I will be forever grateful to you for that, because I think it shaped me into who I was, into who I am, and to who I'm going to be becoming. And there were some dark, dark days, and I thought, I don't know if I can do it. And I remember you saying to me and Mum, yes, you can do it. You can do whatever you set your mind to. Whatever you want in your life, you can go and you can get if you want it bad enough. And you used to say that the whole time. It's not going to come easy. You're not going to get it on a plate. You've just got to want it enough to make it happen. It's quite incredible being sat here with you today. And I know you joke and you obviously say to me, you know, let me introduce you to so-and-so, and then you say, this is my boss, Tash, and how the sort of tables not have turned, because obviously that's not the case and we're working together, but I feel so lucky that you have put your trust into me, into knowing, and I really feel that you feel this way, that I am the person to carry your business on into this new era when you've worked so hard into building it to where it's currently at. And people ask us all the time, don't they, about what it's like working together as father and daughter. I mean, Chelsea says she doesn't know how I've done it for 20 years, but...
Yeah, but here's the thing. We don't actually work side by side 7 days a week,
No.
24 hours a day. So that's really important that there's an understanding that although we work together, we don't work together on a daily basis. You do your thing, I do my thing. You know, we don't really actively work 5 days a week together as such. However, we speak on the phone all the time. We're constantly communicating about what's going on, which is really important for me. But yeah, I mean, I feel now that my time of my career that I am fortunate that I've got you to fill my shoes and that I can pass this business on to you, and I'm lucky to be able to have that. But yeah, I mean, I am lucky now that I feel that a lot of the pressure is off of me.
And on to me.
And yeah, and look, as the CEO, which is the responsibility that goes with that job. But you also know that you've got me on the other end of the phone, that if there's a sticky situation or you're not sure about anything, that you can always call upon me or your mother. I know your mum has mentored you for a long, long time, and she's a very, very wise lady. And I think that she's shaped me to who I am today. And I would probably say the same for you. So we've been very lucky in that respect. But look, we've had our peaks and troughs. I'd say the last probably 6 years has probably been the toughest time for our business and for our industry. I think it started with Brexit. I used to think that it was just a chocolate bar, but actually it's a lot more than that. It's been very damaging to our business and to the industry, whereby a lot of hairdressers that we had back then were from, you know, Europe, Spain, Italy, Russia, Lithuania. They all went back to their countries because they were incentivized to go back to their countries, and that did at the time hit us very hard.
Yeah, we lost a lot of great people.
Yeah, and then of course, COVID. I mean, talk about nailing the coffin, whereby we were closed for best part of 9.5 months, and landlords still wanting their rent being paid. We got into huge debt with HMRC, you know, tax, VAT, landlords wanting their rent paid. I mean, it really, really did put us in the hole.
I have to say, as your daughter and being part of that with you, that broke me, watching you, and Akin and Paul, but
Yeah.
you as my dad,
Yeah.
it broke me to see the hole that it put you in.
Yeah, well, I thought, quite honestly, that was going to be 30, at the time, 35, 36 years of hard graft, literally slipping away before me and being completely out of control, because everyone was hit by COVID. We weren't allowed to step outside our front doors. What none of us anticipated was that it was going to go on for months and months and months. We were able to put all our teams on furlough, thank you. But of course, got Tash here, our CEO, who's navigated our way through the other end, and we're still here to tell the tale. And, you know, Weller, our product partner, who has been by our side for the last 40 years, has been amazing, I've got to say. Thanks, Weller, for your support. It really is much appreciated. And Tash was able to negotiate. Well, I'll let Tash tell you about what she was able to do.
Well, I think, you know, COVID was 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We're 2025, so it was 5 years ago. And I think at that point, I was general manager for the company, and I could see the place that you, Akin and Paul were in when every day we were being hit with another challenge, another fire that we were trying to put out. But, you know, you'd been working for the best part of 40 years back then. And I think as you age, your mindset, your patience, your energy, it changes. It's natural. And what it was doing, seeing the three of you in the place that you were in, it almost fueled me to say, I think I'm the person to steer the ship and to take it in a new direction. And I say this all the time about all three of you, that there's a lot of people out there, when they've been in business for as long as you have, that don't have the ability to change the direction that they're going in because they've always done what they've always done. And yet for you, Paul and Akin, you were prepared to take a chance and to say, you know what, we have done it this way, but actually we need to change what we're doing now, because doing what we've always done actually isn't working anymore, and we need to be doing things differently. And we need to be doing things differently by potentially letting Tash, with a different mindset, who's a different generation, who's a female, who's actually the target audience to the clients that we're looking to attract, to take it forward.
Well, funny enough, I always remember, you've just jogged my memory, I remembered that during COVID that Paul, I don't know for what reason it was, he went to go and see a medium. And I always remember him saying to me that after he went to see this medium, he came and said to me, providing we make the changes in our business, we're going to be okay.
Really?
True story.
I didn't know that.
Did you not?
No.
Absolute true story. And he kind of gave me that hope, I suppose, that so long as we went with certain changes, what those changes looked like at the time, I couldn't have told you. But I always remember Tash coming to me and saying to me, you know, Clive, because I like her to call me Clive as opposed to Dad. Clive, I would like to be the CEO. I said, what? She said, I think I want to be the CEO. I said, blimey, Tash. I mean, I remember you saying to me at the time you wanted to be an area manager, and I nearly fell off my seat. And then, a few years later, you told me you wanted to be the general manager, and I fell off my seat. And now, you're telling me you want to be the CEO. I'm not sure that Akin and Paul are going to be okay with that. I said, and what you've got to understand as your father is that I have to distance myself and take myself out the equation of making that decision as to whether or not you're going to be the CEO of HOB. And you absolutely, you totally got it and you understood. I said, and what I think you should do, I remember telling you, I think you should have a meeting with those two without me, sitting them down and telling them what you want for your life and your career. And to your credit, you went off, you had your meeting with the two of them, and we then had a meeting ourselves, the three of us, and it was agreed that we said that we felt that you needed to do a 5-year business plan. And again, you went off, you said, give me 3 months to prepare a business plan. You went off and you sat with our accountants, I think a couple of days a week in their offices, credit to you, and you presented us with this 5-year business plan that blew us away. And the three of us agreed that you would be the CEO, and the rest is history.
I don't know why it makes me really emotional. Just, I don't know, talking about like where it started and where we are now. I think just from always feeling like I've had to prove that I'm the right person to do any role that I've been in within the company. And actually you talking about me having to go off with Akin and Paul and have a separate meeting. We had, well, a fair few disagreements over the years over that always being your stance on things, and you always saying, as your dad, I have to take a step back and take the emotion out of it, and you have to go and do what every other person would have to do, which is prove it to them.
Yeah.
I believe in you.
Yeah.
But you need to prove it to them.
Yeah.
And I've got an incredible relationship with Akin and Paul.
Yeah.
They're like family to me. And I just think that the journey that we've been on, through all the ups and downs, I wouldn't change for the world. Because I think, like you said earlier on, some of our mistakes have been some of our biggest lessons in business. And through all of Brexit and COVID and where the industry's at and the government change and the this, that and the other, I'm so proud of what we have today, and I'm so excited for the future and how, I still say we, because you're still very much part of the now and the future, but how we plan to grow the business. And I feel so privileged to be surrounded by such an incredible team of people within our company, because we are working with some of the best talent within the industry. And without these people that do surround us, we absolutely would not be where we are today. In fact, I've got people in the business that are running social media, marketing, head office. I couldn't do what I'm doing without the support of those people. And to see people join our company, and hopefully many more talented people will be joining us as we progress and grow forward, really makes me feel warm inside about the special company, not that we've created, but that we're still creating. Because I think in terms of surviving and thriving, you have to be evolving all of the time.
Yeah.
You cannot be standing still. If you're standing still, you fear going backwards, and if you go backwards, you die. And you, Paul and Akin, totally get that. And I really believe that our teams get it, and that the people that we have within the company, the 340 team members, get it as well. And I just want to take the opportunity whilst we're creating this story in celebration of Father's Day to say that there's no one I'd rather be doing this with. Like, I'm so proud of you and what you've done, and I feel very lucky to be your daughter and to be very proud of you.
That's very lovely, Tash.
Give us a cuddle.
Got to say, it really is lovely of you to say. Look, like we said, there's been highs and lows, and there was big changes from my side. I remember at 40 years old losing both my parents 6 weeks of each other, aged 69, and that was a massive turning point for me. I wasn't close to my parents, sadly, but I remember sitting down with Paul and saying, you know what, Paul, there's something that you and I have always wanted to do. And he said, what's that? I said, and that is to go to football on a Saturday. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to work Monday to Friday. I said, and we're going to take Saturday and Sunday off, and we're going to buy a season ticket, both of us together, at Spurs, again, sadly, a lot of pain there, and we're going to go and enjoy ourselves on a Saturday and sit and watch our team play football. And that was a massive, massive turning point for me, and I never ever dreamt that is something that I would have been able to do as early as 40. But I thought, you know what, work, what's it all about? And it was then that I realised that working 7 days a week and not seeing my daughters growing up was a massive regret for me. But I'm hoping that now in my later years that I'm making up for it, and I try as much as I can to be there for both my wife and my girls, because they always used to say, you know, you put your team before us. And that was always like a knife going in my heart. They didn't know that at the time, but that is how it felt when that used to be sort of said to me. And as I say, I'm hoping now, 20 odd years later, that I'm kind of making up for not seeing them growing up, and spending a lot more time with them as much as I can. And I speak to both my girls every day.
Got your grandchildren now?
Yeah, I've got 3 amazing grandchildren. My eldest granddaughter turned 13 on Tuesday. Or was it Wednesday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday even. There you go. See, I can remember what happened 30 years ago, but I can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. What does that tell you? No, look, it's an age thing, but age is just a number. I still feel like I'm 25 up here, but sadly, bodily, you know, a few aches and pains, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I've loved this industry. It's given me a great life. Yeah, I mean, I can't really complain. And of course, now I've got my wonderful daughter by my side, which is amazing. Not only am I looking for a lovely card, but I'm really looking for a substantial Father's Day present.
Don't you worry, I've got one that is in store for you that I've had planned for months.
Great, glad to hear that.
Can't wait to celebrate with you.
High five.
Happy Father's Day.
Thanks.